So welcome. My name is Jules Wingfield, and I just have to say first off that I've just run a really big grief ritual, and I'm just scheduling whatever. Doing this off the back of that is a bit of a headbutt, I have to say. It's a completely different sort of part of my being, so it might just take me a little while to sort of find my way. I'm a little bit. What just happened? Yes, well, indeed, yes. So, where to begin? I'll introduce myself. So my name is Jules Wingfield, and I live in the Forest of Dean, which is just sort of on the border of South Wales, England and Wales, and a beautiful, massive 200,000 acre forest, and we live in a clearing in the woods there. There's a dedicated forest temple, and there's beautiful earth lodge, which some of you might have seen the pictures of in the loos, where we do ceremonies. And I've been doing this for about 30 years, and I've been working with my womb since I was 16, when I had like a really powerful awakening in my womb. Admittedly, I was on magic mushrooms, but nevertheless, it was really powerful, and I just got the whole download of womb cycles and how what's happening in here is completely interconnected with what's happening out there. It's the microcosm and the macrocosm, and that led me on a journey to start asking questions about what the menstrual cycle was, because at that point I'd just had the school education of, well, you know, so you can make babies and it's a bit annoying and a bit inconvenient, but so be it. And I was like, yeah, no, there's something else going on here. So that was how I began my journey. And I've been doing a lot of different work over those years, just working with humans in all ways, but a very strong thread of the work that I feel passionate about is women's work. And my women's work has evolved as I've moved through this cyclical nature in myself, from like my first bleed and then being a bleeding woman, and the work that I did when I did that, and then hitting menopause and the work that I did when I was in that, and now I'm very much out the other side of menopause and the work that's coming through now. So that's what I want to bring. This is primarily a talk. We might do a little bit of breakout groups and chatting. We'll see how we go with time. And I have opened this up to be for every human, no matter what gender. And I feel vulnerable doing that to some degree, because, you know, if we were just sort of, I don't know, if we were just women in the room in a particular way, I might speak in a certain way, there might be resonance of things that I would say, like, no, you know, that maybe is a bit more triggering for men, because, you know, it's difficult sometimes to hear the kind of stuff that women bang on about. But I have opened it to everybody because I just get so many people saying, I really want to hear the talk, but I'm not a woman and I haven't got a womb. You know, I'd like to be able to hear it, because I do a lot of this work with couples, and it's just so transformational. And so many men say, God, if I'd had this education at school, how different my relationships would have looked, and how different I would have been able to navigate myself. So I've opened it up. But what I want to do is I want to give the talk as though we are just women here, so that I'm sort of free to just, you know, say what I want to say. So where to begin? So what I want to say, from my perspective, I see menopause as a spiritual rite of passage into a deeper or higher or wider, whatever word we want to use, spiritual feminine power. That's the lens of which I'm understanding menopause, because it's the lens through which I understand this entire wheel. So I'm just going to go back before we get to menopause and just do like an overview. So all our deep time ancestors, if we go back far enough, all spirituality was earth-based. They lived, you know, this wheel, you might know it as the medicine wheel, but this wheel of life that follows the solar cycles, the lunar cycles, it's embedded in pretty much all indigenous cultures if we go back far enough, because humans understood that for their life to really work and to thrive and to be embedded in this web of life in a healthy and balanced way, we needed to respect nature and understand that we are nature, we're not separate from it. And they understood that the womb specifically was a microcosm of the macrocosm of all the cycles that are happening. The solar cycle, the lunar cycle, the cycles of the seasons, the cycles, like the bigger kind of cosmological cycles of life. They understood that this that what's happening in here is following that. So if we go through the basic menstruation to ovulation cycle, which happens sort of, roughly every 28 days, not many of us that's true, but the basic concept of that, following the lunar cycle, I kind of wonder whether before we had the Gregorian calendar, before we had electricity and artificial light, whether we would have all bled on the full moon, because we would have been in more synchronicity with the natural circadian rhythms of night and day. There's so many things happening to us in the way that we live in the modern world that makes it incredibly difficult for us to really follow the seasons and follow the moon and all of those things, because our bodies are just having to work so hard against so many things that are against it. But if we go back far enough, I imagine that perhaps, we bled on the dark moon, we ovulated on the full moon, we know that from biodynamic farming and stuff like that, the way that all works. So if this is showing the wheel of life, but it's also showing the wheel of the sun annual cycle and also the wheel of the moon. And it's so multi-layered, and we can't go through all of it today, but just to point to the underpinning of what I'm talking about. So the first bleed, the menarche ceremony, which marks the first bleed in the womb, so going from girl to woman, and that is considered to be the first ritual that they've been able to find on planet Earth, actually, is the menarche ritual. And it marks the first bleed and a shift. And what that shift is, ultimately, yes, of course, we are now fertile and can make babies, and that's, yay, amazing. But really what it is it's an initiation into power. So where I'm coming from with these teachings is to understand that the womb is actually our spiritual map to everything it is to be a woman. It's our spiritual guide map. It's all in here. We don't have to go up on a mountain and starve ourselves for 5 days and drink no water and hope for the download. We just go in. At the time of the bleed, we get everything we need at the time of the bleed. So this activation from the first bleed is an awakening into our spiritual feminine power. And we then go on a journey through our life exploring what spiritual feminine power really is and how we can live that as a woman. Now, you can imagine in our modern world, at school, none of us have kind of been given that lens. But if we go back to our deep time ancestors, at the time of the bleed, the young women who were bleeding would go to the bleed lodges, bleed into the earth, because all kinds of things happen when we bleed into the earth, like bioresonance and all kinds of stuff happens, good stuff. But we would bleed into the earth and we would be held by the women who were already bled for 20, 25, 30 years. They were like menopausal and postmenopausal women, and they would sit in the lodges and hold the young women through their bleed and teach them about feminine spiritual power. What is this power? What are you meant to do with it? How is it going to support your life? How is it going to help you? How is it going to help you to be the most amazing, incredible woman you can be? So that's an incredible, vision quest right there. Every month, every time you bleed, you get to sit in a circle of elders who are there to hold you and guide you. Can you imagine even doing one of those for any of us? How, when we were younger, how amazing that would have been, right? Can you imagine doing, in your first year of being a menstruating woman, that you've done 12 of them already? 2 years, you've done 24. 3 years, you've done 36. Can you imagine? You've bled for 13 years or so. How many times you have sat with a circle of wise elder women who've lived their menstrual cycle, who understand what power is around sexuality, around self-care, around health, around purpose, around creativity, around boundaries, all of these different aspects of who we are as women, and we'd be guided. We'd go back to the lodge and be, oh no, I overrode myself, I went and did something I didn't want to do, and all of the things we did, and we just, with the blood, we just cleanse ourselves. The bleed is the process of the cleansing. That is the process of the cleansing. We go into the lodge and we just let go and we give it all back to the earth. and then get the guidance. So there's 4 stages to the actual bleed process itself. And those 4 stages of the bleed process directly mirror the 4 stages of menopause, lo and behold. So this wheel is, if we look at it as the wheel of life, this is winter, place of the crone. So here's sort of conception, here's initiation into power, the menarche ceremony, and then we could say our maiden years if we want to point to an archetype. They're a little bit outdated, but our maiden years, the young years. First gateway teachings here is about self-love, self-knowing. How do we know who we are in relationship to this power? We've got to find out who we are. We've got to separate from the sort of, the teachings of our parents, if you like, who told us we need to be this and that, blah, 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 blah. Find out who we are as women and what power looks like in all ways, with our sexuality, with our self-care, with our boundaries, with what we want to eat, what we don't want to eat, with what we want to do, how we want to do it, all of that. So that's what this exploration is about. And we're guided by these elder women. This axis here, you see, the maidens and menopausal women, there's a direct relationship here. So we go through those years and hopefully we're guided really well. But if we're not guided really well and we're experiencing that we've got some power, we can feel it, right? It's like, oh, I'm a bit sexy, or, I can feel that I've got influence, or whatever. However we experience that power, if we're not guided with it, it's going to go into the shadows. So either we're going to misuse that power and use it to get things in ways that maybe we shouldn't, or we're going to be terrified of that power and not be able to leave our bedrooms. And it's like, oh my God, I just don't know what to do with this power, and we sort of collapse in on ourselves. So if we'd been guided well and we'd had all these times of questing, of bleeding consciously, this initiation into power would be a great thing, and then we would arrive in the summer of our life. So if this is the arc of our life, as well as the 28-day cycle, which is why it's so confusing. So many layers. So maiden years, initiating our power, and then we come into the summer of our life, of full ovulating years, a full sort of possibility, the archetype of the creatrix, which might be birthing a family and birthing children, but it might not be that. It might be birthing ourselves, it might be birthing beautiful work in the world, it might be, it could be anything. It's just about that creativity that we have to fully bring ourselves. And again, we're still being guided by these crone women. Every time we bleed, come back, start again, see what we want to do, where we tripped up, where we overrode ourselves, etc., etc. So here we're practicing power every month, coming back to, again, death, rebirth, death, rebirth, death, rebirth. Every cycle, every breathing ovulation is a cycle of death and rebirth. And we can reinvent ourselves every month, cleanse ourselves. So we're practicing our power, and then we come to menopause, second rite of passage. Second rite of passage here, which is marked by the bleeding stopping, right? This is the marking of the bleeding beginning, and this is the end. So what happens to power here? So in this half of the wheel, this half of life, breathe, hang on. Power, thank you. So in this half of life, our power is very much focused towards tending and nurturing life. Enhancing, tending and nurturing life. That's what estrogen is primarily there to do, to make sure we tend and nurture life. And quite often at the cost of ourselves. It's like, creation's sort of divine brilliance to make sure that we keep everything going and that life is tended to and that life is looked after and life keeps coming. So we're very much in the world tending life. What happens here in terms of power, because estrogen stops at this point and we're no longer in this ovulatory cycle driven to tend life in that way, now our power becomes spiritual power. So from here on, all the way down this side of the chart, as we go past menopause, this is a journey of spiritual power. Now, of course, that's not something we were told, right? Ever. We are told what? When we hit menopause, that's it. Invisible, it's over. Sex is definitely off the table. You're just, waiting to die. You're of no use to society, and but that's the story, right? That's the narrative that's been rolled out for millennia. So I'm here to change that, give you some good news. Yay! And I can say that way through the other side of menopause, I can honestly say that life is just like a million times better than it was. I mean, it was pretty fucking good here, I've got to say, I've had a good life. But, you know, in terms of what I understand now about myself and power and how to be in relationship with that, I can see why the patriarchal system set it up to give us this belief that this is of no value, because otherwise, you know, we're going to take over the world and we can't have that. And who knows, maybe way back, who knows how this all began. Maybe we did abuse our power from the feminine principle. I mean, you know, we've got the patriarchal story, right? But who knows, maybe we don't know why the patriarchy started, do we? Maybe it's because we misused our power and now we're in a cycle of, we don't know. But the point is, the main thing that's going on here at menopause is estrogen stops, the ovulatory cycle stops. We're no longer potentially kind of birthing life into the world. We're now in alignment with spiritual power. So this is like an alchemizing of our power. And so if we look at the bleed ovulatory cycle, this is the bleed, this is pre-ovulation, this is ovulation, and this is premenstrual. So summer ovulation, winter menstruation. You can see the overlay, of the patterns. And this section here, premenstrual, in the monthly cycle, is exactly the same as the section in the life arc of us as women. So here's the spring of our life, here's the summer of our life, here's the autumn of our life, here's the winter of our life in the life arc. So the autumn of our life, the menopause section, is just basically a massive premenstrual. It's a massive premenstrual, like 7 years, 10 years, however long. But what it is it's a rite of passage into awakening into our spiritual power at a whole new level. And because we haven't generally been guided by the elders and gone to the bleed lodges every month, most of us haven't lived that way, right? It's all kind of quite new, this. Because we haven't had that, we get to hear, and actually a lot of women start hearing me talk in this way and feel a mixture of grief and anger. Like, why wasn't I told about this? Why wasn't I guided with this? Because how different would have my life looked if I'd known about all of this, yeah? So we hit this, and we're like, I don't know how to be in this power. I didn't even know it was about power, let alone spiritual feminine power. It's like we're just in this sort of blank canvas, not quite sure what this is, and there's a lot of confusion. So the good news is we hit this, and we have an opportunity for one last premenstrual, if you like, because the premenstrual phase of the monthly cycle is what I like to call the no bullshit zone. So it's like we take a truth pill at this time. So we can tolerate all kinds of stuff over here, right? Yeah, okay, look after everything, override ourselves, give everything to everyone, put ourselves last. All of that stuff that we know, right? And we do it every month. We just override ourselves in all the ways. And then we come to the premenstrural phase of the monthly cycle, and we're just like, oof, we just feel it all in our body, in our psyche, everywhere. We're just like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And we either feel anger, sort of out there at the frustration of what we've done, and we turn it in on ourselves. It's like, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have. Self-persecution, self-blame, the inner critic, all of that. So that's what's happening in premenstrual. What it's trying to do is show us the truth. It's like the medicine. This is the wise woman here who's going, where were you out of alignment with who you truly are in your spiritual feminine power? Where did you go out of alignment this month? And to not to beat ourselves up about it, but we've got the chance to do the work, take the medicine and go, okay, let's see if I can do the work so I don't do it again next month, and the month after that, and the month after that, and keep cycling around with the same patterns, yeah? We've got the opportunity in the premenstrual phase. It's a bit like, you know, when the wave comes in to the beach and it's a beautiful big wave, and then it pulls out and you just see all the old sort of rubbish that's been washed up on the shore. It's like, that's the premenstrual. We see it all, we just see the distortion, and Eckhart Tolle talks about it, that the premenstrual phase in a woman's cycle is where she feels the collective pain body of humanity. And you might raise your hand if you can relate to that when you were bleeding. Yeah, it's like we feel it all, not only our own, but we feel it all. And if we haven't been guided by those elder women, how on earth are we going to navigate that? We can't. So it becomes all the physical symptoms that we get, all the psychological symptoms, all the emotional overwhelm, all the stuff that we just can't metabolize in our bodies because we haven't been taught how to metabolize it in our bodies. We haven't been held and guided. So that's what's happening in the premenstrual, because it's preparing us to go into the holy temple of menstruation. So menstruation is where we leave this world and we sort of step through to the other side. We go through the veil into the realms of the mystery. We step out of life, if you like, as we know it. And we go into this space where the bleed has the possibility to really be a holy experience, a kind of spiritual experience, if we know how to do that and are guided through it. Most of us haven't been. So it shows us here, premenstrual, where we've been out of alignment, and here's where we just do the work. And the work is by completely surrendering. So there's 4 stages to the bleed. There's separation, surrender, visioning, and rebirth. So second spiritual practice of the bleed time is surrender, and it's like a full surrender. I'm not going to go into that now, but the reason I'm pointing to it is because it's exactly the same in the process of 4 stages of menopause. We go through these 4 chambers in this period of 7 years, where, the first stage is suddenly we're like, the veil has been lifted, the illusion has been lifted, and we just see everything in stark, like, oh my God. Here I have been overriding myself my entire life. I've been so many women, I've been in a marriage for 30 years and I've just been tending to everything and completely overridden myself, and suddenly the veil has been removed and I'm like, what about me? Yeah, so lots of women leave long-term marriages here because they realise and they don't know what to do about it. So what's happening here at a biological level, hormonal level, is estrogen stops getting produced in the ovaries. And estrogen is the hormone that is it's the great cover-up. It's the magic pill that just makes us completely blind to all the ways in which we override ourselves. Geniusly, so we'll keep tending and looking after life. So this hormone stops and we're like, I can't do it anymore. I can't keep tending to this. I can't keep overriding myself. I can't keep having sex I don't want to have. I can't keep doing this job that I absolutely hate, that's just wearing me out. I can't keep making all these cakes and working for this voluntary organisation. I haven't got any hours left in it. It's like suddenly we just can't do it anymore. Which means we've got to face some stuff in ourselves, yeah? And this is where I want to bring in the piece about neurodiversity, because so many women come to menopause and then have this massive epiphany that they realise they're neurodivergent. Raise your hand if that's been the case for you. So the thing is, it's not that you've suddenly become neurodivergent. I'm also very neurodivergent. We have always been this neurodivergent. It's just that estrogen made us expert, Olympic level cover-uppers. That's what estrogen does. It is the most powerful hormone in the womb, in a woman's body, driving the story. So estrogen goes, and suddenly, of course, all we've done is just take the great blanket off, and we can no longer mask, we can no longer cover it up, we can no longer pretend anymore. It's just too painful, we're too exhausted. So that's the great kind of awakening here. It's just showing us the truth. So we've got a choice here. We've got to say, okay, so I'm being invited into a deeper level of spiritual feminine power. What does that look like? What work do I have to do to be able to align myself with that? And what usually happens when we hit the menopause, what often happens is stuff that was not dealt with for whatever reason, we just couldn't manage it. Whatever traumas or difficulties happened over here in our maiden years or in our child years, come back to be tended to one last time. We've got one more opportunity, because this is a massive premenstrual, right? The truth serum, to go, okay, all of this needs healing. I need to integrate the wounded child. I need to integrate the maiden who didn't fully live out her teen years and her maiden years in the way that she could have and in the way that she should have. Very, very few of us got to do that. And actually, any cycle that isn't complete, we've got the cycles through life, like the maiden years, of any cycle that doesn't get fully lived in a whole and healthy way will always be knocking on our door to be integrated and completed and fulfilled in some way. So that's often why and this is why in Chinese they call it second spring, because we revisit this. And it is a new beginning. We are basically laying the ground for the second half of our life. That's the rite of menopause. Whatever we do in menopause is going to set the ground for what the second half of our life looks like. Not least, health is now non-negotiable. Like before menopause, eat whatever the fuck I liked and I felt fine. Suddenly, in menopause, it's like I just could no longer eat rubbish food. It made me ill. I was like, damn it, I was like, oh, I don't want that, but that was the truth of it. It's like, it's non-negotiable in terms of our physical well-being. We have to take care, because whatever happens in this time, it sets it in stone. Like if we end up with chronic, long-term health things that go on, and each of us will have a vulnerability. Like mine was my kidneys. So when I hit the menopause, all the stuff that I'd sort of managed to get by with, I knew that they weren't really that great, but I was like, I can override it. But then I got to menopause, I just couldn't. I was just on the floor, my energy, I couldn't get out of bed. And it's because I needed to tend to stuff that was in my kidneys that had always been there. But the estrogen had kind of just smoothed it over and over and over again, and now it wasn't doing that. So each of us will have a vulnerability. Some people it might be bones or joints, some people it might be the lungs, some people it might be stomach issues, whatever it might be. So in that way, the symptoms are the teacher. They're not something to just be gotten rid of. Doesn't mean we shouldn't take care of the symptoms and tend to them and eat healthy food and get on all the herbs and do everything we can to make ourselves well. But to not get rid of the symptoms because we see them as an interrupt or a problem or something that shouldn't be happening. The symptoms are trying to show us where we've been out of alignment, whether that's psychologically, emotionally, physically, on whatever level we've been doing that. The symptoms will point us back. My kidneys was about ancestral stuff on the male line and patriarchal blah, 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 and I had to do all of that deep kind of, soul clearing work in that whole line before my kidneys could kind of start to recalibrate themselves in a way that was, making them work well. So it is physical, but it's on all levels we need to do it, because this is a spiritual path that we're on. So the womb basically is our teacher, is our guide map, is our path. That's where we need to be looking, is here. And each time we bleed, if we go inside and we listen, we get the answers we need. And in menopause it's no different. We go inside, we look, we track, we search, we listen really, really deeply to what wants to be tended to, so that we can alchemize our power. So now, as we move into menopause, we also haven't got as much energy as we had in the first half, right? So here, we've got loads of energy, estrogen, just pumping energy into us all the time. Well, I'm Superwoman, I can do absolutely everything for everyone, and I can run 5 marathons, and look after the kids, and have a career, and blah, 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 blah. We get to here, it's like, whoa, I just don't have the energy I have. There's things I want to do mentally, I'm doing it all, but actually my body just can't keep up. So in that way, we're going to have to get clever about how we use our energy. And it's the same with the power. It's like we can no longer be the fruit tree that just is so laden with fruit the branches break. It's like as we, the fruit tree is going to start just, maybe still producing fruit and really like good fruit, but it's not the abundance of it. So we need to really consider where we put our energy, where we align our consciousness, how we do our emotional work. and where we are going to walk in terms of this spiritual power, what that actually looks like in our life. And where do we go for wisdom for that? We go inside, but also we lean into each other and we look to women who are further on, who hopefully have spent a life bleeding. So now we're looking at the crone women. This is the crone here. So I want to focus on this section here, because this is the menopause section. And if you see here in each section, there's the archetype. So here we got the maiden, here we got the creatress, here we've got the high priestess, and here we've got the crone and the elder. And each of them have a gateway teaching. It doesn't mean that the teachings only live in those quadrants, but they're most potent in those quadrants, whether we're talking about the monthly cycle or whether we're talking about the life arc. So the spiritual teachings in the maiden time of our life, or the pre-ovulation, is self-love or self-knowing. We have to know ourselves before we can begin to know how to be in the world or relate with others, right? So the spiritual teachings, self-love, self-knowing. When we come into the summer of our life, or ovulation, the archetype here is the creatress. We might be creating babies, we might just be creating life, projects, whatever. And the spiritual teachings, creativity. This is where creativity is most potent. Right? It's not that creativity isn't anywhere else in the wheel, but it's where it's most potent. And then we come to the autumn, or the premenstrual and the monthly cycle. Here, the archetype is the high priestess, and the teaching, the spiritual gateway teaching, is sexuality. Pause for effect. Because at this point, most people go, huh? Wouldn't it be there? Like, you know, where we're sort of like most creative, or wouldn't it be here with the maidens, right? You know, they're all like, you know, primed and juicy and plump. That's the patriarchal model. So in the patriarchal model, we're basically allowed to be maidens and mothers, right? This is the kind of like the patriarchal arc. Ideally, we want to be maidens for as long as we can possibly string it out, yeah? But we can have babies, we're allowed to have babies. It's important to have babies, we need to continue the line. But as soon as we've had the baby, we have to get back to looking like babies as quickly as possible, yeah? That's how it works. And it's just so painful, right? So we hit the menopause and we're trying to cling to this, just utter absurdity, and start doing the facelifts and the this and the that, and then trying our best to still pull this off. But you see, yeah? This half, because this is about coming into life, because it's about ovulation, and this is about death, because this is about menstruation. This is all about what it looks like on the outside. This is all about what it looks like on the inside. So in terms of spiritual power, yeah, you can see. And then spiritual power, now it's like deeply inside. You know, what becomes attractive as us, as women, as we get older, is the spiritual, feminine, radiant power that is moving through us and just like literally coming out through our pores. And that we've embodied that we've, you know, claimed that and really know how to walk and live it. Yeah? It doesn't mean it's like dominating or something, it probably isn't. But it's deeply, deeply feminine. It's like we're just a channel for love, but at this point probably quite fierce, uncompromising, unapologetic. Yeah? The sword of truth delivered through the heart. Because here in the premenstrual phase, this is where we take the truth serum, but often the way we deliver the truth that we see is completely unpalatable to anybody on the receiving end of it, right? Because it's just so full of all the, you know, unprocessed emotion and all the stuff that's in the sort of patriarchal line and blah, blah, blah. So we're like, rah! And it's just can't hear it. So our work in terms of feminine spiritual power is how can we speak the truth that we're shown about what needs to happen, what's the disturbance in the field, but to be able to say that in a way that it can actually be received. That it awakens the field and they go, yeah, thank you for saying that, rather than, whoa, you know, I get off, you know, you're just making me wrong, something like that, yeah? And we can see that in relationship, right, in partnerships between men and women. You know, she gets to the premenstrual phase and she's like, ah! You know, And if you're with a man, it's like, yeah, but over here it was all kind of fine. Suddenly it's this like demonic, like, I said the same thing over here and you thought it was a great idea. Over here you want to cut my head off. What's going on, right? Not least with sexuality, right? Over here, happy for a quick sort of, nighttime fumble, not that connected, just a bit of a whatever. Over here, same thing's offered and you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah? So, we take the truth pill here, and I want to talk about sexuality in the High Priestess because it's really key, because here is where the potent teachings are around sexuality. It's not here and it's not here, and I'll tell you for what. I'll tell you for why. Because here, spiritual power and sexuality is about tending in the world and tending life and tending relationship and tending everything with the earth, the family, blah, blah, blah. Here, it's about spirituality. So sexuality becomes about a gateway into awakening sexuality as a spiritual force on planet Earth. So it doesn't mean we have to wait to menopause to be able to do that, because remember, in the monthly cycle, menopause and premenstrual are the same thing. So again, here, premenstrual, this is what Tantra is trying to point to, is this section here, where it understands that sexual energy is a spiritual power. And when a woman is connected to her eros, which is a fundamental energy of the feminine, and she's in healthy relationship with her power, she can literally awaken the entire bloody world. Yeah. Can you imagine if those women were running the countries? Can you imagine the difference that would make? So we're not there yet, but we're getting there, step by step. So the reason that sexuality is the gateway teaching here, and the reason that this is the High Priestess, is because she's no longer kind of driven by this estrogen hormone, which kind of makes her override herself. So it's very difficult to do that spiritual work when you're just so driven with that estrogen, just like a kind of bit of a pocket to it. So that's fallen away, so she can kind of feel more deeply these things. So if, wait a minute, how's that? Yeah. So in terms of sexuality, there's kind of, there's two strap lines that go in this section. So before menopause, I'm talking about the collective. Of course, we're all going to have our individual experience, but just to point to something that's sort of in the collective field. Before menopause, our relationship to sexuality is sort of, well, of course, I want the most amazing sex and intimacy I know and I long for and I really want. But it doesn't sort of seem to be on offer, or maybe it is, but not enough, in my life. But it doesn't seem to be on offer, but I'm sort of okay with it being just sort of all right. It's nice, there's nothing wrong with it, it's okay, but it's not exalted cosmic union, yeah? And it's okay because there's other things I want. I want family, I want to do my thing in the world, I want to be my power, So we go, any sex is better than no sex, yeah? Because I don't want to be alone, I don't want to it's like I want connection, I want contact, I want love, I want intimacy, I want all those things. So it's not really ultimately what I want, but it's better than nothing. Hit menopause, take the estrogen away, start to awaken to the spiritual power, the strapline changes to, I'd rather not have sex than have mediocre sex. I'd just rather not have it. Which is problematic for long-term relationships, right? I mean, if you're lucky enough to be in a relationship where you're already all your life having this incredible cosmic sex, then, brilliant. But for so many women, that's not the case. It's not the case. And this isn't, I just want to say here, because there are men in the room, this isn't because the men are crap. This isn't because let's just get on the whole man-bashing exercise. Where were the men ever taught about intimacy and sexuality? Where were the women ever taught about intimacy? We're all fumbling around over here, right? we've got some deep sense of it, but we don't know how to get there. The women don't know how to guide the men because we're just so angry and frustrated and disappointed and disconnected, and we don't even fucking know what we want or even how to ask for it, even if we did it, you know. It's all of us together. This isn't about saying the men are the problem. It's really not like that. It's kind of like the field we're all swimming in, you know, unless we've specifically seeked out how to heal our sexuality and do that awakening work, we're going to end up in this paradigm that I'm talking about. So we get to over here, and basically what happens is quality control goes up. The quality control team go, I just can't, my body, I just can't do it anymore unless it's holy and spiritual, and you're willing to absolutely meet me right here in my power. But of course, we might not be in our healthy version of our spiritual power because we've just taken the lid off lifetimes of rage and sex and violation and overriding ourselves and saying yes when we meant no 1,000 times. That little volcano comes erupting up, and whoever we're in relationship right there gets the whole bloody lot dumped at their door, right? No wonder so many of the men then in these long-term marriages go, I'm fucking out of here, man. I mean, she was lovely before. Saturday nights, bit of routine, and now, what's going on, right? I'm going to go and find myself someone who's a yes girl. Be much easier. So, we need to do our work because we might start to get more in touch with what we want and we know what we long for, but how do we create it? We've got to do that work of all the stuff that sits behind. Rather than blaming the men, actually, where did I say yes when I could have said no? I'm not talking about the times where we were violated, but all the thousands of times in my life where I said yes because actually that was better than just not having anything. You know, I just still want to be in contact in this moment. I want a bit of intimacy, so I'll just go with it. And actually, that's a betrayal to ourselves. So we start to see the self-betrayal in stark, bright lights, and we want to blame it out there. We want to push it out there and go, oh, the men, you know, maybe do it. And it's like, well, let's really examine that, yeah? Because the wound of the feminine is abandonment. We will do anything to avoid abandonment, anything at all, because that we're already uprooted. We're like an uprooted plant with the hand of the patriarch, just dangling in the air. Our roots need to go back in the ground. But because of that uprootedness and how painful that is, we will do anything not to be abandoned, not to feel alone, because that's so painful. So we do things we don't want to do. We stay in connections we don't want to be in. We override ourselves in the moment and end up in things that don't feel really quite right, but maybe better than nothing. But now it starts feeling like, no, it's not better than nothing, actually. Can't do that anymore. So if we want to find out what we really want and awaken in that way and use our eros as a force for change in the world, not just who we are as lovers with other people or with ourselves, but actually eros as a transformational spiritual feminine power in the world that can transform. That doesn't need to be a threat to anybody. If we're really doing that in a healthy way, that's not going to threaten anyone. That's not going to threaten any men. No one's going to feel afraid of that. They're going to feel inspired by that. But we've got to do that work. We've got to find out who we are as women. We've got to find out what our eros is about. We've got to find out what our sexuality is. We've got to do the healing work of all the times we overrode ourselves so that we can effectively make that invitation from love to awaken the field. Yeah? And this is a big piece of what menopause is about. Not what you were told, right? Not what you were told. And you can see now the access. It's like these, if you've had a lifetime as a menstruating woman and you get to this place and you really are in your power and you know how to be in your sexuality, which is going to take you to all the different ways of your power, you're going to be a pretty effective guide for the maidens. Yeah, you're going to be able to really help them. Yeah, so that's what we need. We need more and more women who've been working with this cycling over a lifetime to be able to now hold the young women, because the young women, they're, you know, it's like, look at the way things are in the world with the young women and how little holding and guidance they've got. I don't blame them one iota. It's like there's just such a profound lack of holding. I mean, it just, yeah, really, I feel it so deeply, like what they need and what they're not getting, and how that then transpires, which is either just a complete armouring up and a just profound overriding in their sexuality, which I know later on they're going to end up in talks like this going, oh my fucking God, you know, it's just so profoundly painful. So as menopausal women, we have I would say a duty. I want us to wake up and start supporting the younger women. Wherever you are on this journey, even if this is the first time you've heard all of this and this is a new thing, nevertheless, we've cycled, we've lived through this body. And the thing is about, just want to come back and say something about this override and the quality control going up. And talking, and because a lot of women get to menopause and they say, I just don't feel my libido anymore. It's just, I couldn't be less interested. It's just dropped, it's fallen out. My vagina's dry, I don't want to be touched. It's just, like we're in that zone. It's like I'd really just rather go gardening or go and sit in a cafe and have some tea or whatever it might be. What I have learned from working with menopausal women over the last 10 years, more than 10 years, is that it's not true that we don't want to be connected to our sexuality anymore or feel the importance of how it relates to feminine power. However, if we don't know how to really claim ourselves and our power and find ways to meet in that, and we don't know how to say no, our body's going to do it for us. Basically, the body is going no. That's why the libido goes down. That's why the vagina goes dry, because the body's going no. Whereas before, the estrogen went, well, we'll let you get wet anyway, just, just keep it going. Now, it's like, no, do the work, get in alignment, know your truth, speak your truth. What is it you want to create? How are you going to invite that in from love? Yeah? When I do work with women and I take them through this process, and every single time, pretty much without fail, once you get a woman to a place of really getting in touch with what it is she wants, and to feel that longing, and it's presented to her, lo and behold, suddenly it's like, quite right now, and I feel my sexuality. Oh, interesting. Because it's like we cannot compromise anymore. So my message to you is, don't believe necessarily that it's over on that level. Actually, and I can speak this for many women who are postmenopausal, that sex on this side postmenopausal is just knocks the socks off all of this, even if all of this was brilliant. So that's the good news I have for you. Yeah. It really, really is. It absolutely is. It's spiritual, mind-blowing, just exalted love. That's what is on offer. And just to speak to, there's also, because a lot of people say, well, what about the men, right? What's going on for the men? So the men do go through a menopause. I don't know if that's there. Anyway, the men also go through a big process here because testosterone does the same thing as the estrogen. Testosterone suddenly goes out and the men go through, the midlife crisis terminology that we use, but they go through a really deep process. And there's an awakening that can happen here, and if they can stay with it, if you can both stay with it and work with it in this way consciously, there's profound gifts for both. There's absolutely profound gifts for both. Now, a lot of times that's not happening, but the young men who haven't been initiated into sexuality, because that's not in our modern world, there is this deep longing, this ache for young men to be initiated into their sexuality, to be shown how to be a sexual being as a man. Like, what is this power that I have? What's this masculine power? And there's a natural attraction between the younger men and the menopausal women, because they can feel, the menopausal women who stay connected to their sexuality and are working with it in a conscious way, because they can feel the power that's there and they want the awakening. And as we know, any rite of passage for men, for the masculine, is about being faced with can you imagine 10 Carlies and giving one man the truth, and it's like, can I hear the truth, or am I just going to collapse under the weight of the toxic sort of shaming or whatever? But can I actually hear the invitation to awaken and take that invitation? And the young men still have that kind of warrior energy, and they can feel that they need that much power, because the women, so many of the women in their age are still struggling because they haven't been guided. So they want that potency. I mean, there are dating apps dedicated to this. I'm serious. I've done this talk a couple of times where there's been a lot of younger men in the room, and we ended up with this sort of thing where they were exchanging phone numbers and men standing, no men going, I'm looking for one. And then there was a woman stood out and she said, well, I'm looking for one. And then they all sang. It was just brilliant. Anyway, so that's what's going on there. And then it just, again, just moving into here, we are, as I say, laying the ground for the second half of our life. So whatever we do here basically is laying the ground. So take care of your physical well-being. Health is just non-negotiable. I'm not talking about health here, but I do have a really good 7-pillar health program. If you want that, you can get in touch with me and I can take you through it. So there's that, and that's like on a physical level. There's emotional work, there's spiritual work, there's psychological work to do, and we need to be doing all of it. And if we do, you're just going to have a rocking second half of your life, absolute rocking. And you're not going to be worrying anymore about the lines and the wrinkles and the rolls of fats and the saggy boobs, because there's going to be something inside that you've got so deeply that will radiate out from you, and that is where the power is. So, there's time for a few questions. What's the time? Okay, yeah, there's time for a few questions. If anyone wants a question or comment or share anything, I'm open to hearing questions, because there's loads I haven't covered, but just to give it a... Yes, you have to speak loudly because I can't hear. Say more about the...
Neurodiversity.
What's your specific question?
I suppose how it relates to the space of life.
Well, basically because it's everything I've said, because it's just as soon as you take the estrogen away, all of the neurodiverse stuff is just going to just completely expand and blossom in your being, all of it. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that, and it's about going on a journey to understand your neurodiversity. And what I want to say about neurodiversity from my perspective is I don't see neurodiversity as a problem to be pathologized or fixed. There are aspects of it that are definitely difficult. I have social ones that I can't do small talk, I can't, all that kind of stuff. You can't do small talk. But actually, even the ones that are that I find challenging or difficult are really only because of the way culture is structured. Yeah, I don't think that neurodivergent people are the problem. I think that society is the problem and the way that we've structured it. And we need to change the way that structure is. Yeah. So neurotypical was invented about 200 years ago, I can't remember how long ago, I'm crap with history, by a bunch of professors in a university who said, how can we most effectively create an effective workforce? How do we educate people in order for them to become an effective workforce? So they decided, here's the framework of the best way that people should relate to each other and function in society so that we can most easily control them and curate them. That is neurotypical. Only 20% of the population is neurotypical. It's not neuromajority, it's neurotypical. And that's what we've all been taught to aspire to and that we should be. And this is why there's so many people going, I'm neurodivergent, because actually it's most of us. It's most of us. And most of the things I would say about my neurodivergence are the reasons that I can do the kind of work I do. That my calling in my life, my superpowers, the way I've been able to create this amazing project that I run, that I can sit here and do this, and all of the things that I can do. There's probably 10% of my neurodivergencies that I find difficult, but again, that's only because of the rules of social engagement that don't fit with the way my brain is wired. Yeah, and that's true, I think, for all of us. And so I want to kind of bring that lens to neurodiversity, because I think it's really important, because so many of us just feel like we're pathologized, like it's a problem that needs to be mended, and it's not a problem that needs to be mended. We need to change the culture.
One favorite practice for neurodiverse women to connect.
I don't think I can answer that, because everybody's neurodivergence is different, right? So there can't be one practice. I would say for me, my journey, the thing that's helped me the most is self-understanding. Is actually really understanding that, I've got a list of, I'm probably on 82 at the moment of things that I've gone, oh yeah, and that, and that, and that. And just going on my own educational journey. And I don't believe also that you're stuck with the things. The more I've understood something, the more it's changed for me. Like the face blind thing, which I've talked about now in the end of all my workshops. So how could I have lived for 58 years and not known I was face blind? This isn't sort of, oh, I'm just not good at remembering people. I literally don't have wiring for facial recognition. So until I've spent a considerable amount of time with somebody, they're filed in a file. But other than that, and I only have associative memories. So if I saw you on a tube, and if I, even like my really close friends, if I saw them on a tube in London out of context, I would not necessarily recognise them. I lived for 58 years not knowing that, but profoundly being affected by it. So, you know, say at a festival, loads of people feeling like I'm ignoring them, or literally deliberately just like blanking them and feeling mortally wounded because I'm, you know, oh, but I'm this person that's been really loving and done all this way, and it's like, she just fucking ignored me. And it's like, no, I didn't, I just didn't realise. Yeah, so understanding that and getting awareness about that and then speaking that changes everything. So awareness is powerfully transformational, and getting to know what your particular things are is 90% of it, I think. Yeah. So you had someone at the back, you had your hand up for ages.
I've got a question about, I've had a hysterectomy, so can you speak about like
You'll still go through that process, you'll just go through it at the point that you have the hysterectomy, unless they continue to give you estrogen and you've still got your ovaries. But if you have the whole lot out, yeah?
Yeah, they give me estrogen, but should I be taking it? Should I just be letting it go?
I don't think there's any shoulds about it. That's a deeper question, and I'd need to have a deeper conversation with you about where you are in your life stage, what you want, and to know the answer to that. But I do want to speak to the HRT, because I know that lots of people ask about the HRT, and I'm not here to say what anyone should or shouldn't do. Sometimes things are so physically painful and debilitating that actually HRT is the only way we can actually stay alive, literally, and function. Personally, I didn't want to take HRT, and I was in bed. I couldn't get out of bed. I mean, it was pretty bad, because I wanted to go through and do the spiritual work, and I felt for me that the HRT might have taken me away from that. But I don't want to make it wrong, because I think every woman has to listen so deeply to what's right for her. It's impossible to say there's a right or a wrong in that. But it's, you know, it's the same with the what do you call it, conception, and the, you know, it, again, you know, maybe it is better for a young woman to not be getting pregnant and dealing with whatever this does. Everyone's got to make an individual choice. Can't possibly, right? Yeah. So for that. Yes.
I'm postmenopausal. I absolutely love sex, but
Hey!
and I've had all the phases that you said, like,
Yeah.
no, and
Yeah.
all of that. But I've still got masses of fear that any day now it's just going to end. And I just wondered if you could talk about how it then goes from that into the last phase.
Yes, thank you.
Because,
yeah. Okay. So So here, basically, the further we move towards here, the more sex becomes about energy than it does about friction and skin and contact and movement. It becomes much more about, you know, like saying the ultimate tantric kind of thing, where you're just sitting there and you're looking at each other and you're just breathing into the chakras. No one's moving, but it's all going on, because the friction is kind of, it's all in this paradigm. Yeah, so, and as we've got less and less energy, so it becomes less about the body and more about energy, more about the mystery. So that's the transition, yeah? And the women usually want the friction to stop before men want the friction to stop, and there's a rub there. There's a difficulty. Sorry? Absolutely. Thank you. I'll speak to that as well. So over here in the spring, when we were maidens, what we were meant to do was explore all our sexuality and find out who we are, what gender we are, what sexual preference we have, how we want to identify, all of that. But of course, in our culture, if we do that, what are we called? Sluts. If men do that, what are they called? Conquerors. So we've not been allowed to do that. But how do you know that chocolate cake is your favourite if you've not tried all the others? You can't know that, because you can only say, I like chocolate cake. So we are meant to try all of these things for that self-knowing, so that we can then start to make some decisions about what we want to do up here. and then alchemize that, like literally alchemize the metal into its most potent form. And often, because we're coming back to this second spring, women often go, oh my goodness me, I thought I was heteronormative, and now suddenly I want to change my gender, I want to change my sexuality, I want to change who I want to be as a lover, I want to change everything, yeah, and find out who we are. And that's to be celebrated, because we're laying a path for the second half of our life. Figure out what we want and who we want to be, yeah, which I think is completely in alignment with why there's such a massive movement now for questioning gender, because it's all part of this same thing. We've got to question everything and come out of all the narratives that we've been in. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There's lots of questions, I know, but I'm going to